I'd like to call this meeting to order. I am Mike McGowan, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the committee meetings this morning, April 7th, 2021. Present in the boardroom are Director Bagley, Kavanaugh, Frost, Friend, and myself, McGowan, and then participating remotely are Directors Tanya Cook and Gwen Howard. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at M.U.D headquarters located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the website after the meeting's conclusion. I'd like to announce that due to the Governor's extended executive order suspending in-person meeting requirements under the Nebraska Open Meetings Act, board members are permitted to participate remotely if they so choose. This extension will remain in effect until April 30th. I would like to remind those attending in person at the board meeting today that we must abide by the City Council ordinance requiring that all those attending in person wear a face mask or a face covering or maintain 6-foot distancing from one another in indoor public settings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This ordinance will remain in effect until May 25th, 2021. Now I'd like to invite our Vice President of Safety, Security, and Business Continuity, Shane Hunter, to provide a briefing regarding protocol for those in attendance at the board meeting today in case of an emergency. Shane?
Shane Hunter, Vice President of Safety and Security. Good morning. Normal entry and exit paths are the way we came in at the back of the room. There's also a second exit right here to the side that goes out to a common corridor. In that corridor, you'll find a fire extinguisher, the nearest one for us, as well as a first aid kit and the nearest AED. Should there be a medical emergency, 911 will be called by security and they will escort first responders into this room. As well, that same corridor is our shelter for severe weather. Should that arise, we are in severe weather season. And if we need to evacuate this building for any reason, we'll go out the same door, take 2 lefts, and reconvene in the parking garage for accountability. That concludes the safety briefing.
Thank you, Shane. Mary, could we have roll call, please?
McGowan?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Kavanaugh?
Here.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
I would like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available in the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in the nearby room set aside for members of the public who may attend. All right, now, construction operations. Mr. O'Brien, will you step us through capital expenditures, please?
Thank you, Director McGowan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Good morning, everyone. Corey O'Brien, Vice President of Engineering and Construction and Interim Chief Operations Officer. Behind tab 5 this morning, you'll find our capital expenditures letter. We have 10 items on our letter this month, and I'll briefly discuss several of them for you. If you'll turn to page 2, under System Improvements, item number 1. This project is a capital expenditure request of about $180,000 to relocate an existing gas regulator station located at 156th and West Maple Road. The current gas regulator station is underground on the southwest corner of that intersection. We are proposing to move that regulator station above ground to the northeast corner of that same intersection. There's 2 primary reasons we like to do this with these underground regulator stations. The first being employee safety. The existing stations being below ground are in vaults, and anytime we have to inspect, maintain, repair any equipment on those stations, it does require our employees to go into a vault, which is a confined space. So moving the stations above ground eliminates that process. Second reason is that being in vaults, many times these regulator stations, the vaults they are in fill up with water or get water in them, and that creates a very corrosive environment for our pipe and our equipment. And by moving the stations above ground, it eliminates that corrosion potential as well. So I'm going to bring up some pictures here to show you where we're proposing to put this regulator station. Sue, if you could bring up that photo for me. Thank you. While this is coming out, okay, so what you're seeing is the intersection of 156th and West Maple Road. and that is the northeast corner of that intersection. Inside the yellow circle is where we propose to put this regulator station. It winds up being about 85 feet north of the north edge of West Maple Road and about 240 feet east of the east side of 156th Street. If you look real close to the right of that yellow circle, you'll see a little box there, and that's an existing transformer box. So we're putting our station in the general area of some other above ground utilities as well. Now this location has been approved. Thank you, Sue. This location has been approved by the state of Nebraska and the city of Omaha, and we have also discussed it with the commercial business to the north, which is a Walgreens. So if you'd go to the next slide, please. Here's a little bit different view looking at from like roadway elevation, and that's where we propose to put it. Again, you can see the transformer to the right of it, and it does set back quite a ways off the roadway. Next slide is kind of a repeat of the first one, Sue. You can go to that one. Again, showing where we'll put it. The next two slides, this is what an above ground regulator station will typically look like when completed. It is well protected by the steel bollards. The whole thing is painted a nice gray to keep the appearance attractive. And so more generically, I guess, for your information, the district currently has about 309 regulator stations in our system. Some are low pressure, most are high pressure regulator stations. Currently we have 126 of these above ground, and 183 are still below ground. So we do have some work to do. We have this one and one other one that we are proposing to move above ground this summer. That's all I have to say on that item. And are there any questions about that before I move on to the other items?
Yeah, Corey, I have a quick question. Will this disrupt traffic flow in the area at all?
It shouldn't. We'll be doing directional drilling for the installation of the mains that will go to and from the locations, and the existing station is not part of a traveled roadway, and the proposed one is well back, so there should be very minimal impact to the traveling public. Okay, good, because that area has just been, there's been so much construction on the road the last few years there. It's just something every week, it seems like, so that'd be nice not to have to do that. Thank you. Yeah, agreed. You bet. Any other questions?
Corey, Dave Friend here. I do have a question. This came up a number of years ago when Ron Reisner was a VP, so that tells you how far back this is. And I can't remember the answer. I'd asked questions about the security of those because there's no perimeter enclosure that keeps a person from walking up to them. Are they part of our, if I'm using the right acronym here, are those part of our SCADA network, so that if we would have gas escape from there, whether by accident, mechanical failure, vandalism, whatever, can we tell if that happens?
Generally, yes. And Jim Knight, you can certainly weigh in if I misspeak, but it's not uncommon for these regulator stations to have pressure points associated with them, so anything that would happen at them would be immediately noticed. And we put our pressure points in places so that we can do just exactly that and monitor anything that would happen. So you are correct. They are monitored, and we would know.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay, and certainly we can go back if there are. Thank you, Sue, for sharing. Under building plans and equipment, we have 9 items. I'm not going to go through all 9 of them, but I do want to talk about several of them together. Items 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9 on pages 2 and 3, and they all have to do with vehicles and equipment. Together, they add up to just under $2 million worth of requests. 876,000 of that is for vehicles. About 1.1 million is for equipment, and I'll just talk about them a little bit each here. So on the vehicle side, we are asking for funding for 16 new trucks. They will be used in a variety of different divisions. As an example, construction will be getting, and these are replacement vehicles, so construction will be getting 3 new welder trucks, a drill truck, a couple of trucks that will be used for towing equipment. Water distribution will get 4 valve turner trucks and 2 new steamer trucks. And corporate communications will get a new pickup. And this pickup is typically used for our parade vehicle and for our public events, and it calls our hydration station. So we in the past have wrapped this vehicle with graphics, as it is our vehicle that we use in a lot of public events. So what happens if approved, when we bring these 16 vehicles these 16 trucks into the fleet, one of two things will happen with the vehicles they're replacing. They'll either immediately be sold at auction, or they will be trickled down into the fleet, and then other vehicles will then be pushed out of the fleet and sold at auction. And the transportation division does an excellent job of managing our fleet, because surprisingly, with a large fleet, if you don't manage it carefully, as you bring new things in and don't send things out, suddenly your fleet grows, and they do an excellent job of making sure that doesn't happen by accident. So a variety of uses of these trucks going to numerous divisions. On the equipment side, we have two types of equipment that we're requesting funding for. The first is vacuum excavators. Vacuum excavators are a heavily used item in our fleet. They are used daily by primarily two divisions. And so the four machines that we're requesting funding for, one is a smaller unit that will be used by water distribution. Three are mid-sized units that will be used by construction. These are replacements, so as they're brought into the fleet, the used machines will be sold at auction. The other type of equipment we're asking for funding for are directional boring machines. These, again, are highly used pieces of equipment, and they are highly specialized pieces of equipment used by the construction division. We are asking for 3 new machines, 2 smaller units, and 1 mid-sized unit. They are also replacements. So as the new machines come in the case of these will not be sold at auction, but rather they will be traded in as part of the purchase process. And John may speak a little bit more to that on his bid letter. But these are, like I said, specialized pieces of equipment. We have standardized on the Ditch Witch brand of horizontal directional drilling machine. We have found that there are advantages to standardizing on one manufacturer for this type of equipment. The primary benefits being that the employees that run them, they are all familiar with the operating systems, and they are a specialized piece of equipment, so that is important. And secondarily, the transportation group who has to maintain these machines, they have the commonality of parts and systems to work on. So these are a single bid item for us at this point because they are specialized, and we have standardized on the Ditch Witch brand. That's all I plan to speak on capital expenditures. Are there any questions on any of that or any of the items that I did not cover?
Corey, I have a couple of questions. First of all, on the vehicles in items 3, 4, 5, and 7, all of them say they cannot be converted to CNG because of a new engine or something like that. Are we losing the ability to have CNG in our fleets?
That's a good question, Director McGowan. And Andy may weigh in if I don't cover it completely enough, but it has to do with the type of vehicle that we're currently buying, and it's somewhat out of our control. On these sizes of vehicles, they simply aren't. There aren't CNG conversion kits being offered for these sizes of vehicles. So there isn't an option for us to pursue that on these sizes of equipment. We get into the bigger trucks where we can still do that, and we're still able to get CNG. But the manufacturers and the aftermarket CNG upfit manufacturers, there isn't as much focus on this class of vehicle right now. So our choices are limited for CNG. Andy, did I miss anything there?
No, you covered it well. It's driven by cost of fuel is the main driver on what manufacturers actually produce CNG equipment. So you answered that well, Corey.
Thank you.
Do we have pickups right now? Do we have 4x4? We have pickups that are CNG using CNG right now in our fleet, correct?
That is correct, Mike. Yes, we do. We have quite a few, actually.
Okay, so this is just a class of a bigger pickup that we can't get the conversion kits?
Well, some of these are similar in size to the ones that we do currently have CNG for, but as the model years change and new engines are introduced, that's a dynamic part of this that if the CNG upfitters, they have to make a choice whether to provide kits and upfit kits for those new models. And so even though, say, an F-150 we bought 5 years ago could easily have been converted to CNG, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the situation today.
Well, I guess two things.
Yes.
Are we always looking for the model and make that we can convert to CNG? And secondly, are we lobbying or doing anything with these companies to make sure we can get CNG on there? You know, do we promote CNG? We can't just sit back and let, you know, this market fade away from us.
This is Mark Doyle, President. I'd like to take a little shot at the industry on this, Chairman McGowan. And for the rest of the board, I'm as big of an advocate as there is for CNG vehicles, and being internal for almost 10 years now and spending the time on the board where we were excited about it, and we still should be. It's ironic that we are setting records internally for CNG in transportation, but it's mostly due to, I'm going to answer your question about whether we're lobbying or not after I make a comment on the industry. It's mostly due to being ready when large customers like UPS and the bus rapid transit system that Metro sponsored and others, I don't want to leave anyone out, but they have offsets on the backside that we aren't involved in because of the environmental or the low carbon aspect, so they get credits for that. So the industry's moving at a high speed on new CNG motors all the time. All the journals that come out regularly indicate that there are a lot of great options. But for a consumer like us, and ironically we're a gas utility, I get it, or some of our local fleets that may not have the advantage of the environmental credits, it isn't probably the right answer. I agree with staff on where we're going and not to move into the upfit area of this. If they're OEM or they're delivered from the factory, that's different than us retrofitting them. And as Director Friend knows, the retrofits aren't always perfect, and they cause maybe more problems than we should be causing. But so there's a lot going on in the natural gas vehicle industry. It's setting records across the country, but it's mostly for fleets that receive environmental credits on the backside. So the industry is really healthy. We will continue to look, but where our benefit is being able to be ready for users like UPS that are national leaders, and the bus rapid transit system, FCC Environmental, which will do nothing but add vehicles. We're on a clip to set records every year, and I know last year we broke 2 million gasoline gallon equivalents of CNG. Great question. It's hard for me not to say every vehicle will be CNG, but I think staff is correct on this one. But we're a gas provider, and we want to be there. So,
well, you know, Mark,
thanks for the questions. But
I have to say, it is very pleasing to me, and probably the other directors too, when you're out driving in public and you see a M.U.D vehicle and it says powered by CNG, you take a little pride in that. And I want to make sure that we keep that focus and look for these CNG vehicles and go out of our way to find them if we have to. So now my second question with regards to vehicles, it seems like every month we have these capital expenditures to approve 6 vehicles, 10 pickups, or whatever. Every month we have some. Do we have a master plan, or can we get a master plan of how many vehicles we're going to purchase in 2021, 2022, or something like that, so we can kind of anticipate as a board member how many vehicles we're going to see asking for approval each month? It just seems like last month there were 10 of them or 12. This month there's 15 of them. You know, it just seems like every month we have some. I just want to make sure and feel comfortable that we have a plan in place to systematically replace these vehicles.
Well, Mark Doyle, President, again. Before I hand this question off to Andy Melville, I'd like to say that when we bring a CNA back, we'll try to do a better job of not making this seem like it's a surprise because the process has already run its course and they've been budgeted. The CNA is simply the procurement process. But your point is well taken. Over the years, we've struggled as a board with seeing long-range plans for any type of a procurement, and certainly vehicles and transportation is a significant procurement area. We do have, I won't say we have a master plan, but we have a good solid plan with an outlook that finance, Joe Schaffert and his group, work closely with transportation. I think we have a better handle on it with our new transportation director that's been in place for half a year or maybe more. But Andy, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yes, thanks, Mark, and thanks for the question. To answer your question, Director McGowan, yes, we do have a master plan. We look at 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, all the way out to 5 years, what our expenditures are, and we can work with you to provide that in a larger format. The reason that we typically see multiple bids for vehicles throughout the years is based on the type of equipment or the vehicles. In this case, these are various sizes of pickups and different configurations, and each one is bid out differently. So that's why we try to spread them through the year, because we'll also have to do the upfitting of those vehicles once they are arrived into the fleet. And another reason that we lay this out over a year is some vehicles take almost a year to actually get from the manufacturer, and then we have upfit time as well. And so this plan that we look at addresses the time frame that it takes to receive the equipment, to upfit it, and make sure that the existing equipment in place can actually last to the time that the new replacement is put into service. So there is a master plan, and we are also working on moving from, the industry has changed from based on mileage and time or age of the asset to more of a total cost of ownership, where we look at what is the most money we can get out of the piece of equipment or the vehicle once we are done with it, take that into effect, and then also the cost per mile that we incur when we have it in the fleet. All that is looked at, and then we can predict that it may be better to sell a piece of equipment after 7 years because the maintenance costs are less and the return on the asset is greater at that time. And so all that comes into play with this master plan. And like Mark said, we can provide a little more clarity or bigger picture view if that would help as well.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. It makes me feel good that you look at asset valuations and everything. I don't recall when we approved the capital budget in November last year that we ever saw a schedule that showed how many vehicles were in the capital plan for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So I would ask if you could, I would like to see the schedule for 2021. How many are in the plan for 2021? Realizing I know it's fluid and it can change, but I'd like to know how many vehicles we have planned to purchase in 2021 and how many we have purchased to date, so I can anticipate how many we're going to have coming to us in the future board meetings.
Sure, we can do that.
That'd be great. That's all I have.
And we have that. So, Mark Doyle, thank you for asking. We have that. We'd love to show it to you. I feel like when we talk about transportation and we could talk about total cost of ownership of an asset and cost per mile, and the planning aspect is better than it's ever been in my almost 28 years, but we'd love to show you that. So thank you for asking.
Any other questions for this item? Okay, then I'd ask Ms. Henn to review the acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates, please.
Good morning, McGowan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Stephanie Henn, Director of Plant Engineering. I will be addressing the finals letter behind tab number 6 this morning. We have a short finals letter this month, only 2 projects that we are finaling. One is a gas IR project and the other is a water development project. I'll just want to touch on the gas IR project just briefly, which is item A. This is a Q3 contracting project. Q3 has been our gas IR partner since 2012. This was a large project. There were only 3 projects in 2020. In the calendar year 2020, this was one of them. A large project near 42nd Center was about a $3.6 million project. There was an overall deduct on this project of about $142,000. This was primarily due to paving replacement. Less paving replacement was required than originally estimated. This is the 3rd and final project that's going to be final from the 2020 calendar year with C3, our contracted gas partner. And this project, large project, abandoned approximately 10.2 miles of cast iron gas pipe, which is moving us along in all of our abandonment goals. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zellers, will you please review the bids on materials and contracts?
I sure will. Good morning. John Zellers, Vice President, Procurement and Enterprise Services. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Bids on materials and contracts may be found under tab 7. There are several items I'd like to discuss this morning. The first may be found on page 2. We are asking for ratification for the implementation of the Business Planning and Consolidation Project through TechLink International. This project is a 2-phase project that will simplify and automate the annual budgeting and reporting process. The first phase was completed in 2020, which included licensing and design of the system. The second phase is the system implementation. 6 vendors were asked to provide proposals, of which 4 did. Through a collaborative effort, accounting and IT evaluated each of the proposals, held on-site interviews, and reviewed references. TechLink not only provided the lowest pricing, but their methodology, accelerator tools, and technical knowledge set them apart from the other providers. Implementation is estimated to be completed by mid-June, allowing utilization of the new system for the development of the 2022 budget. The next item I would like to discuss are associated with the vehicles and equipment that Mr. O'Brien spoke about. We accepted bids for 1 550-gallon vacuum excavator and 3 800-gallon vacuum excavators. We are recommending the second low bid from Midwest Underground, as the low bidder did not provide a complete bid. At the top of page 3, we accepted bids for 1 33,000-pound trailer, in which we are recommending the third lowest bid from Ditch Witch for a felling trailer. The 2 lowest bids did not meet specifications for either payload capacity or various structural components of the trailer. We accepted bids for 2 medium-duty crew cab pickups, which the low bid by Gene Steffi did not meet specifications for being E85 compatible. This is important as E85 compatibility qualifies as an alternate fuel under the Department of Energy EPAC regulations. Having E85 capable vehicles allows the district to stay in compliance of the regulations that requires a percentage of alternative fuel vehicles in the district's fleet. The bid from Husker Auto Group is recommended. We also are recommending the bid from Husker Auto Group for 2 medium-duty regular cab pickups, as the low bid from Gene Steffi did not meet specifications. We required a 3/4-ton truck, and they bid a 1/2-ton truck. The next item I'd like to discuss may be found in the middle of page 4. We received bids for new uniforms that will be worn by operating divisions to include field services, meter services, water distribution, gas distribution, and water quality. The uniform will maintain the current navy blue pants, but now will incorporate a high visibility upper apparel, enhancing the safety of our field personnel. As part of our implementation of the new uniform, we'll be notifying our customer owners of the change through our website, social media, and other public outreach. Now, at this time, I'd like just to share my screen to give you a view of what the uniforms will look like. And hopefully this is showing up well for you. On the left is our current uniform, where we have options that include T-shirts, a polo, and a button-up shirt. We also have hoodies, and we also provide a jacket as well. On the right is the high visibility uniform that has the same style of shirts, the polos, the T-shirts, long sleeve and short sleeve, button-up shirts, and various jackets. These uniforms not only provide for high visibility through the color of the uniforms and the reflective striping, but also features UV protection. M.U.D will be printed on the back of those shirts between the shoulder blades, and that will be printed with a reflective ink that has been approved through our safety division. We will also have a logo on the front, and the T-shirts and polos are made of moisture-wicking material. Just show you a quick other slide just to give you a feel for what the uniform will look like overall. The black band at the bottom of the shirts was selected on purpose, as a lot of these field operating personnel are doing tasks that they get dirty. And so the black allows the uniforms to maintain a more cleanly appearance when they're washed, or they may get stained at the bottom of the shirts. All right, and with that,
John, can I ask a question real quick? How are these
Sure.
How are these uniforms distributed to the employees? Is everyone issued each one of those four, two of them, or as needed? How do you do that?
so when we onboard an employee that is required to wear uniforms, we actually have a policy in place as to what they receive. And so those are outfitted when the employee onboards to a particular position that requires the uniform. And then our stores division manages the replacement. So there is a process that is in place where uniforms that are worn out, they are sent back to stores. Stores will place an order, and then the uniforms are then disposed of such that we assure that they are not sent to, I guess I'm going to say goodwill type operations, such that they're available to the public. So that is kind of a high level as to how we manage the uniforms.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question, more about the vendor side of it. I'm Dave Friend here, by the way, for those that. Anyway, I'm familiar with Great Plains. I don't know anything about SP Incentives. Is there anybody that can tell me are they a local company? Are they a brick and mortar store? Just a little something about them, please.
Yeah, so SP Incentives, actually, we have done business with them, and they have provided our uniforms over many years. They are a local outfit, and I believe they do have a brick and mortar store as well. We have also worked with them on a apparel storefront for district employees that may want to purchase polos and other apparel that has M.U.D logos on them. So yeah, they are somebody that we have done business with for some time, and they are local.
And John, this is Jim Begley. While they are local, I do have to ask: are the shirts American made? They're not made overseas anywhere. Are you aware of where they produce their shirts?
You know what? I will have to check into that for you, Mr. Bailey, because I do not have that direct answer as to whether they're American made or made overseas. I can tell you that we did settle on a specific brand, and both of those manufacturers are able to provide those brands. So the pricing that and the proposals that they provided are for the exact same apparel.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
All right. The next item may be found. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
The next item may be found at the bottom of the page. We are recommending entering into contract with Burrell Enterprises for concrete and asphalt paving repairs associated with various district construction sites. In the past, we have had difficulties finding contractors for this work as it is not steady or a defined quantity of work, making it difficult for contractors to dedicate resources. We have also had challenges with previous contractors with quality of work and responsiveness. For this contract, we chose to take a different approach in which we reached out to 16 specific contractors, requesting their participation in a request for qualifications. Of the 16 contractors, only 2 submitted the required documents. We issued a request for proposal to the 2 contractors in which only Burrell Enterprises responded. The other contractor chose not to provide a proposal as they could not meet all the requirements. Burrell comes recommended by several references, and we have utilized Burrell on several paving repairs last year. During this time, Burrell was extremely responsive, performed quality work, and we received feedback from customers praising their work. The last item may be found on page 5. We are recommending a 3-year extension with JEO Consulting for construction phase inspection services for contracted water mains. JEO has been providing this professional service since 2014. Their services include water main inspections, contract administration, documentation, record keeping, and GPS tracking of contracted water main development projects, including large transmission mains. The extension includes a 4% annual price increase for 2021 and 2022, and a 3% price increase for 2023. This equates to about an additional $10,000 per year. JEO dedicates 3 inspectors for water main inspections, which allows district inspection staff to inspect and oversee more complicated projects. JEO has provided quality service under this contract and is a valued and established partner of our engineering inspection team. And that is all I have for you this morning, and would be happy to answer any further questions.
So, Dave Friend here. I've got a quick question about the construction phase inspection services. I guess I may have missed something years ago. I thought we had field engineers that were the ones that would oversee the inspection of not only internal but all contracted mains. And it sounds like, based on what I just heard you say, and I don't want to misconstrue or misunderstand, since 2014 we've had outside contractors, and I'm looking at Mr. Begley because I thought we had talked about this. I thought our internal field inspectors, and I may be using the wrong job description, but I thought our people did this. So 7 years we've had an outside contractor doing at least that part. I'm not saying that that's all JEO does. I'm just talking about the inspection portion of it.
Yes, you are correct. So we do have internal staff that inspects both work that is conducted by our crews and work that is conducted by contracted crews, both water and gas. When we started ramping up our efforts for infrastructure replacement, specifically on the water side, we had looked at a different approach as to bringing on a consultant or an inspection service to actually inspect contracted development type water projects, which are well, quite frankly, they're easier to not only install but easier to inspect as well. And so that effort happened back in 2014, where we put out an RFP. We interviewed or accepted proposals. I don't remember the exact number, but from several different consulting firms, engineering firms that could provide that service. And JEO was selected at that time to assist us in our inspection efforts. They have performed outstanding over the last several years. There is a learning curve associated with this because the district has extremely tight guidelines on how we inspect and how we expect our inspections to be conducted. And that takes about 2 years to get a partner up to speed per se, in order to get to the point where we're confident that they are inspecting to our level. Now, with that, we do have kind of an inspect the inspector process as well. I would probably let Stephanie Hand speak more to that if you'd like some more details around that. But to answer your question, yes, we did bring JEO online back in 2014 to help us specifically with development water main projects.
Thank you. So, and this is the second renewal of that process?
I believe this is that. I believe in 2014 there was a annual. I think there was a that specific one was an annual agreement, which would allow the district to evaluate their work. And in 2015 and 16, the contract had for 2 one-year extensions, and so that was executed. And in 2017, there was a 3-year extension that was brought to the board, and so then this would be correct, the second 3-year extension that we're bringing to you for approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Thank you, John. Now we'll have Mr. Ogsmore review the...
I'm sorry, my mute was on. This is Mark Doyle, Director Friend. Would you like us to hold this over and do a larger review on this? I questioned it internally because it does go back to 2014, and I understand we're ramping up our work and we're under the gun, but I agree with you on this topic, and I understand where you're coming from.
Well, I raised it, and maybe it was not, I didn't bring it up before, but I'm looking around at the other board members to see if there's any interest in doing that. My concern, Mark, and would I like to hold it over? Yes, but I don't want to create a problem where that then stymies or reduces our ability to be able to move forward on construction projects because we delayed something a month. So I don't know if that delay would cause, I mean, I would prefer to have our own people doing this to the extent that we can, and I guess I thought that there was some outside assistance at one time when we were ramping up, but I did not know that it extended to it. And of course, I don't know how much of the $800,000 is the inspection part and how much is the engineering part. So I'm looking at my colleagues that are here in the room, and of course I can't see Gwen and Tanya, but I'd feel a little more comfortable if I knew a little bit more about it, I guess. And Jim?
Dave, I'd support if you wanted to lay this over for a month. I'd be supportive. So long as it wouldn't impede anything.
Can you hear? You can hear me, right?
I can now.
Director Friend, and you can now. Okay.
We lost the boardroom for a moment on WebEx. If you're back now.
So we talked internally quite at length on this. So you're on a topic that, you know, I'm on the fence a little bit based on I don't want to hold things up, but we are direct. Stefan, do you want to take a shot at the real specific question is, would this hold us up to have a larger review for a month and then come back next month?
Can you hear me, Mr. Doyle?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Stephanie Hand, Director of Plant Engineering. What we would have to do, we certainly can hold it over. What we would have to do is, because the JEO has been our partner over the last few years, we would have to have them continue throughout that time in order to stay current on projects, because the construction season is already going great guns out there due to the nicer weather that we've had. So we certainly can hold it over, but we would have to have them continue to work on their old contract in order to not hold up projects.
When does pardon me, I don't have the deeper review in front of me. When does the contract expire?
It just expired here in the last month.
Okay, then I have to apologize to the board because we brought it entirely too late. That's my fault. Let's hold it over and talk to them about extending, and then we'll revisit it between now and next month and have it on the agenda next month. Is that okay, Directors Friend and Begley?
Yeah, I'm speaking for myself. It's okay with me, and I got to say, I don't know what the process was, and so I'm not pointing fingers, but I don't like being put under the gun where we're asked to approve something that is either already expired or about to, when I'm assuming this was probably something that was known 6 months ago. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'll take the blame for that. I should have sensed the same thing. That won't happen again. Thank you. And I think we'll be just fine in the meantime. These are not the more difficult inspections, as Ms. Henn said. We have our folks do the more difficult ones, so I'll take that. I should have sensed that. So thank you for your patience and understanding.
Any more discussion on this item? Okay, should we move on then? Mr. Oddsmore, will you review the proposed capital expenditure for a building lease at 142nd and C Circle?
Of course. Good morning, Steve Osmore, Senior Vice President. Behind tab 8, you'll find a request for capital expenditure for a proposed lease of a property on 142nd and C Circle. Over the last year, the District Construction Center has settled due to construction activities associated with an adjacent third-party construction site. Settling has progressed, resulting in damage that caused the closure of a portion of the northwest section of our construction center to ensure employee safety. This closure resulted in the displacement of various operating work groups to include construction, field service welders, electricians, and carpenter. These work groups have been temporarily relocated while a search for a suitable facility has continued. A letter of intent to lease has been submitted by us, the district, to the owner of the property located at 14242 C Circle. The LOI, or letter of intent, is not a binding offer to lease, but outlines terms and informs the owner of the district's interest in leasing the property. This facility provides us over 41,000 square feet of shop and office space. The terms of the lease will allow the relocation of displaced work groups and provides for parking of smaller fleet vehicles for a period of 3 years with 2 one-year optional extensions. That's reflected in this request for capital. Approval of the CNA will authorize the President to enter a 3-year lease agreement with 2 one-year optional extensions for the property located at 14242 C Circle. Furthermore, approval will authorize purchasing to enter into an agreement with Patriot Crane and Rigging for relocation of equipment, materials, and cranes. Are there any questions?
Steve, I have a couple questions. Is this, when we lease this, it's going to replace our other plans where we were going to have a kind of a tent for our area for our construction folks to go in at some location, a big tent type of structure? Is that right?
If we're going to go with a temporary structure, we're 6, 8, 10 months away from that being erected and finalized. There's 3 primary reasons that we're seeking lease on this property. Number 1 is continuity of operations as near to as normal as possible. With these displaced folks, as we displace them, it displaces other folks, and there's a trickle-down element to this. It allows us, number 2, allows us to expedite repairs on our construction center as soon as we possibly can. And 3, and finally, the future settlement is unknown, and continued damage continues to be an unknown unknown. So without additional action or lease on this building and or the addition of the semi-permanent building or the temporary structure, we find ourselves at a single point of failure with additional damage to the construction center.
But at some point, we won't have the temporary structure and this lease. We'll have one or the other?
Right now, we're focusing on the lease because that is immediately upon us. And with approval of this capital expense, there's no guarantee that we're going to get the lease on this vehicle. So this is the most urgent of the 2 options.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that this won't satisfy our needs going forward, and including the temporary structure.
I guess I'm still confused. Are we looking to pursue both avenues? Or if we get this lease signed, we don't have to do the temporary structure?
Our hope is that when we get this lease signed, we will not need the temporary structure.
Okay, that clarifies.
But that being said, okay.
Okay, my second question, and it's probably maybe more for Joe Shafford, will the cost of this lease be expensed currently, or will we defer it pending the outcome of litigation with the city and/or insurance company?
Good morning. Thank you for the question, Director McGowan. Accounting treatment will prescribe that we expense these lease payments, but that's not to say that they won't be reimbursed via insurance proceeds and/or via other recovery methods. But the accounting guidance will prescribe expensing them.
But we will keep track of them in a cumulative manner, so that when and if we get the city to be liable and reimburse us, we got the costs all categorized.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Dave?
I've got a question, and Steve, I don't know if this is for you or for Mark, and I thought we'd purchased a building off of 75th or 76th. I don't remember what happened to that, or we were looking at purchasing one?
That's a great question. Thank you for the question. So, Director Friend, specifically the building on 76th Circle, after we did a final assessment and got the numbers back, it was a poor business decision to own this property. The amount of capital it would have required to get it up to a functioning level for us was extraordinary, and it was beyond our expectations. So we labeled this as a poor business decision. This building at 142nd Circle takes the place of 76th Circle. We have abandoned that idea.
That's what I assumed, but I just wanted clarification because maybe I forgot. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Steve, this is Tim Kavanaugh. Is this building north or south of Industrial Road? I'm trying to picture where it is exactly.
It's south. It's right across from Full Draw. It would be on the southeast.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Moving on, Mr. O'Brien, will you review the proposed main extensions, please?
You bet. Corey O'Brien, Vice President of Engineering and Construction and Interim Chief Operations Officer. Line tab 9 is our main extensions letter for this month. We have 7 main extensions, 2 gas and 5 water. The impact of our main extensions on the gas side is 130 single residence lots and 1 commercial lot. On the water side, the impact is 511 single residence lots, 2 school lots, and 2 commercial lots. If you look at the map that we're showing, our 7 projects are distributed amongst 3 of our subdivisions this month. Turning to page 2, the 2 gas projects, I'll just mention at a higher level, both projects do have some district funding as part of them. Number 1, just under $27,000, and number 2, just under $17,000. This is to upsize 2-inch mains to 4-inch mains for the benefit of our gas distribution system. Moving on to the water, I'm only going to speak about project 4 on page 3. The other projects, 1, 2, 3, and 5, are fairly straightforward. And I would mention that all those projects, the developers have requested M.U.D gas along with M.U.D water. If you'll turn to page 3, project number 4, water main extension number 4, this is a project to install water service and fire protection to lot 1 of the Gretna Public High School number 2 subdivision. This project does involve about $340,000 of district money. I want to explain where that comes from. The project itself can be considered to be in 3 pieces of water main. The first I'll talk about is the interior part of this project. That's about 1,400 feet of 8-inch ductile iron pipe, and that is paid for 100% by the developer. The second piece of this project is another 1,400-foot piece of main. This is 16-inch, and this is an approach main. The developer project will require a 12-inch main. We are recommending upsizing that to a 16-inch main at district expense of about $108,000. The third part of this project is about 825 feet of 16-inch main, also approach main, in 180th Street. This piece of main will connect two existing dead ends of 16-inch main, thereby improving flows and reliability to the system around this school project. The cost of that third part, the 825 feet of 16-inch main, is about $231,000. Of that, the district can expect to recover up to 72% of that cost as development occurs along that piece of main. That's all I have to present to you on the main extensions. Be glad to answer any questions about any of our projects, however. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Savine, will you review the employee wage and/or salary increases and ratifications?
You bet. Good morning, Bonnie Savine, Vice President, Human Resources. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Great. I will begin by recapping the employee counts for the end of March for both 2020 and 2021. On March 31st of 2020, there were 823 regular full-time employees with 4 regular part-time employees for a total of 827 regular employees. To end this March, there were 800 regular full-time employees and 4 regular part-time employees for a total of 804 regular employees. At the end of this March, we also had 4 temporary part-time employees and 1 temporary full-time employee. And that will take us into a brief review of jobs that are actively in the job placement process with the district. We have 3 jobs with requisitions routing through the approval process at this time. We have 3 jobs posted right now. We have 3 new jobs that will post on Friday of this week. 11 jobs are in the application review or interview stage, and 2 jobs have selected candidates, and they are in the hiring process, getting start dates set up and scheduled. On to tab 10. You will find the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications letter. Human Resources is recommending the Board of Directors approve wage or salary increases for 12 employees this month. 6 OAC employees are being promoted through the normal posting process. 3 OAC employees are being promoted due to the natural progression promotion process. And additionally, 3 SPA employees are being promoted into SPA positions. Do you have any questions?
Bonnie, could you reflect for a moment on your student summer intern program? I'm always interested in that.
Absolutely. You bet. Thank you very much, Director Howard. We are still actually accepting applications for 3 of the 4 positions for our summer program. We typically look for college students, current college students, but the program is also open to college-bound students, those who have a high school diploma or GED and are registered for fall classes. Students do have to be 18 years of age to work here at the district, like all employees at the district. So the program is available from May through September, and it is a 40-hour work week for those students that work with us for the summer. This year, we're looking to bring on 23 summer employees, and we are actually underway making outreach to some of our candidates at this time. We do have 4 positions that we fill. We use those 4 job categories of sorts to fill those 23 positions. The clerical position, we did have a number of candidates for that position through our initial posting end date, which was March 31st. So we are full for the clerical positions. But the other 3 positions, we have extended the application deadline through April 15th. And those positions are for survey or field worker, painter, and general laborer. So by all means, if you have any candidates or college students that you are aware of that might be interested in our program for the summer, please send them to our website under the careers page.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks for the concise answer.
Hey, Bonnie, it's Tim. What does that pay per hour, so I can pass that on to anybody interested?
You bet. The first year students are paid $12.75 an hour for this year, and second year students $14 an hour.
Now, second year meaning second year of college or second year in this program?
Second year in the program.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's not bad wage. Thanks.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kubat, will you review the third legislative report for this year, please?
Tab 11, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Are we on, family focus, okay. Let's go skip down. And Mark Mendenhall, will you review the family focus credit union? I got it out of order, I'm sorry. We'll get back to you, Rick.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President and General Counsel. Behind tab 11, you will find a letter from Mr. Kim, staff attorney with the district, regarding management's recommendation to enter into a long-term 25-year lease with the Family Focus Federal Credit Union. The Family Focus Credit Union is a credit union open for membership to M.U.D. employees and their families. They currently occupy space at our operations center just off of the lunchroom. We have space available for them here at HQ, which they have not occupied yet because of the pandemic, although we expect that to happen hopefully sometime this year. Through a review and discussions with the credit union, we have agreed in term to the lease, which is found behind the letter. Again, fairly simple in nature, just makes this relationship more formal, I would say. And I would also mention to the board that we've had a long-term and very positive relationship with the credit union, and I think it does provide a lot of benefits for our employees, for its members. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Mark, how long has M.U.D. been a partner with this credit union?
My understanding is, and Mr. Zellers, you may have to chime in here, but my understanding is the credit union was founded in 1931. So we're going on almost a 100-year relationship. So I think you're 90 if my math is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. And actually, the credit union started with a district employee where she had a small little cash box in her drawer on her desk, and so there's a long history between the district and the credit union.
Wow. Okay.
John, that's very heartwarming. Thank you.
I assume that
You're
we have
welcome.
a lot of members, employee members of the credit union that participate actively with loans, car loans, savings, whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And actually, the new space here at the headquarters will allow more accessibility for our employees to conduct business with the credit union. As it stands now, if they need to sign any sort of loan papers or need any sort of more in-depth financial assistance beyond just walking up to a counter, they have to go to the main branch that's next to Menards on 72nd and L Street. But this facility will allow the 300-plus employees that will be stationed at HQ to have more accessibility to the credit unions. They'll be able to provide that service.
Great. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Now, Mr. Kubat, I'll get back on track here. Would you please give us a update on the third legislative report?
Rick Kubat, Government Relations Attorney. On tab 12 should be the legislative report. The opening paragraph speaks to LR 49, which was an investigative hearing conducted by the Urban Affairs Committee related to natural gas during the polar vortex. The district provided testimony, specifically Mark Mendenhall testified at that hearing. We due to the situation, the district came out looking really well under those circumstances. There were some smaller public gas utilities throughout the state of Nebraska, and even some larger ones that were forced to procure gas on the spot market, and they're going to have to, in all likelihood, spread those costs over their customer base over time. With that hearing, Senator Wayne in the Urban Affairs Committee is attempting to bring an amendment on a different bill that would provide up to $10 million in grant funding for some of these smaller communities that suffered due to the polar vortex situation. From there, I'm going to skip around really and just mention three bills, and happy to answer any questions. The first bill on your list is LB 26 by Senator Wayne. That bill seeks to exempt sales tax, both state and city sales tax, on specifically residential water. That bill has been prioritized by Senator Pauls and currently sits on general file. My expectations are that LB 26 and some of these other bills that require expenditures of general fund dollars will be heard after the legislature debates the budget bill. From there, I'm going to skip to page 2, which is Senator Lindstrom's LB 178. That is the bill that provides for a statewide turnback of both sewer and potable water bills for infrastructure assistance. As mentioned last month, that bill has advanced from committee. It sits on general file. It does not have a priority designation, and Senator Lindstrom is exploring the possibility of potentially attaching that bill onto another bill that currently sits out on the floor with a priority designation. And then lastly, I wanted to touch upon on page 4, Senator McDonald's LB 406. That's the bill that creates the Lower Platte River Infrastructure Task Force. That bill did get a speaker priority designation. It does currently sit in the Natural Resource Committee. It has not been voted out yet. That being said, it has been substantively altered via an amendment where Senator McDonald is creating, and this is a mouthful, but the statewide tourism and recreational water access and resource sustainability special committee. In short, what he's doing there is he is bringing in some folks. He's creating a special legislative committee to look at recreational and other opportunities for Lake McConaughey, as well as Lewis and Clark in Niobrara State Park up in Knox County. It does still contain the provision within the bill that looks at flooding control mechanism in the Lower Platte River, and that amendment does still contain M.U.D as an interested party of a subcommittee that would look at issues surrounding the Lower Platte River. The only other thing that I would say that the amendment does is it gets rid of funding in terms of receiving funding from the Water Sustainability Fund. Under the amended version of the bill, it would be a straight $2 million appropriation from the state's general fund. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Rick, this is Jim. On LB 178, I just want to thank you for the information you've provided to me, and you've kept me updated on this process. And I know it's an ongoing task for you, but I greatly appreciate all the work you're doing on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I think that's it. Mr. Myers, will you review the 2020 financial recap, please?
Myers, Vice President of Accounting. I'll be discussing the information behind tab A in your materials entitled 2020 Financial Review, and I will share my screen to display that information. Okay. So with the audit recently completed, we wanted to take a look back at the full year results for 2020 and also review a few key metrics that we use to measure the district's financial condition. Later in the meeting, Robert Kreiser from RSM will discuss in more detail the results of the audit. And I would share that most of this information was also presented to the audit committee at a meeting on March 22nd. To start with, I'd say that 2020 was definitely a challenging year in many ways because of the pandemic, but the district performed very well, both operationally and financially. We'll take a look at that here on slide 2 of the materials. And this shows a high-level summary of the revenue, expenses, and net income for both the gas and water departments. And you can see, just getting right to the punchline here, net income in the bottom right chart was a total of $85.9 million for the year, with $45.1 million from water operations and $40.8 million for gas operations. Looking a little bit closer at the water department, that's shown in the light blue bars on the chart. Net operating revenue in the top left was $139.9 million. That was about 1% higher than budget and about 15% higher than 2019. Water sales were largely impacted by drier weather conditions during the year. Precipitation was 18 inches in 2020 compared to normal annual averages of about 31 inches, so about 42% less than normal. And that lower precipitation increased demand for water, which can be seen in the volumes in the top right-hand chart. Looking at operating and other expenses down in the lower left, those were $94.8 million in 2020, which was $11 million lower than budget. The biggest contributor here was the favorable variance in the year-end adjustments made to pension and OPEB. Combined, those had an impact of about $13 million in a reduction to expense. These are made annually according to the current accounting standards and based on actuarial calculations. And the biggest impact that resulted in those adjustments was strong investment returns the past couple of years in both the pension and OPEB trusts. The pension plan had nearly 14% return on its investments in 2020, and the OPEB plan had returns of about 13%. These adjustments helped to reduce operating expenses, but they did not impact our operating cash. We continued to make contributions to both pension and OPEB trust as we had planned. You could sort of think of these like accrual basis accounting versus cash basis, similar how you depreciate fixed assets and it reduces net income, but it doesn't impact the operating cash balance. Offsetting that favorable variance for the pension and OPEB adjustments, we did have a few non-recurring items I wanted to point out. First, we had incremental costs in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Those totaled about $1.2 million, with about $1 million of that charged to the water operations. And water operations, the majority of those were related to the premium pay earned by employees who were working in isolation during the pandemic for the month of April at the 3 water treatment plants. The other items included in that cost are PPE, cleaning and sanitizing, and other supplies and materials. The second non-recurring item is the ongoing cost of repairs at the water treatment plants that were caused by the flood damage in 2019. The district spent about $2.6 million on those repairs in 2020 and received insurance proceeds of about $1.8 million, leaving a net increase in expenses of about $800,000. And we're continuing to work with our insurance carrier to recover the additional amount, and we do expect to incur some additional costs in 2021 to complete that work. Finally, the third of these non-recurring items is the additional costs. We had about $300,000 of incremental costs associated with the settling issues at the construction center. And we split that about equally between gas and water, so $160,000 of that cost was charged to the water department. And just following up on the discussion earlier, we do have a separate project number to which we code these costs for any of these insurance-related claims, and we track those separately and report those along with supporting documentation to the insurance carriers along the way so that we can obtain recovery of those costs through our claims. So putting all those factors together, the water department ended the year with a net income of $45.1 million, which was $12.5 million better than budget and $22.1 million better than 2019. Turning to the gas department, you can see in the dark blue bars, net operating revenue after reducing for the cost of gas was $102.9 million. This was $2.7 million lower than budget, or about 2.5%. We had increased revenue generated from higher volumes, but that was mostly offset by non-volume related items, such as we had lower recovery of peak shaving projects with capital spending down compared to budget. And when we spend less on capital projects associated with those peak shaving assets, we recover less from our customers through the GCA component of our rates. There were also lower revenues on late payment charges and service turn-on charges. As you recall, during the year, we suspended temporarily the disconnections and late payment charges for our customers to assist them during the pandemic. And we also had slightly higher bad debt expense this year, which was a reduction to net revenue and also at least partially caused by impacts of the pandemic. On the expense side, it was similar to water. The chart on the left shows $62.1 million of operating expenses, which is $12.8 million below budget. The biggest impact here again was the pension and OPEB adjustments. This had an impact of reducing expenses by about $15 million. And there was a smaller impact related to those non-recurring items. We spent about $200,000 on COVID-related costs and another $200,000 of incremental costs related to the construction center project. One other thing that did impact this area, we did have in the budget that we would receive proceeds of $2 million from the planned sale of some surplus land near the construction center. Those plans changed during the year, and we did not sell that land, so that had a $2 million unfavorable impact on the operating and other expenses here. Combining all of that, we had a net income of $40.8 million, which was $10.1 million better than budget and $1 million better than 2019. I'd like to take a look at our personnel or staffing for the year. We ended 2020 with 814 employees, 809 full-time and 5 part-time, very similar to where we ended 2019, but as you can see, much lower than the budget, which was a total of 872. There are really two main reasons why we're so much lower than budget. First, the budget of 872 reflects what we would consider the authorized number of positions approved for the district. That would be how many employees the district would have if all positions were filled. And we know that isn't always the case with, we typically have vacancies for retirements, resignations, and other reasons. So when we prepare the budget, we do adjust the wage dollars. We include a 3% attrition factor to account for that, but we do not adjust the headcount or staffing number. Had we done that, a 3% reduction would have been 26 positions, or a total of 846. The second factor is the intentional delay of hiring of certain positions. Early in the year, in response to the pandemic, we intentionally deferred some costs, some capital, and some hiring decisions. And at that time, we deferred 32 positions to be hired at a later date. And so combining that 32 and the 26 from the attrition factor really explains the difference between budget and actual staffing at the end of the year. The final slide provides a summary of several key measures that we use to assess the district's financial condition. Probably the most important of these is the top section there on cash reserves. As you can see, the water department ended the year with $83.3 million, which was up $2.5 million. This represents about 354 days cash on hand, which is just slightly down from a year ago. I would point out for those of you who attended the audit committee meeting, we did make an adjustment to this, and these numbers are a little bit different from what was presented there. Essentially, we removed the impact of the non-cash pension and OPEB adjustments from the days cash on hand, and that lowered the days from what was originally presented, but I think is a better representation of our financial situation. You can see on the gas side, we had unrestricted cash of $151.2 million compared to $140.4 million at the end of 2019, which is an increase of 10.8. We had 377 days cash on hand, up from 297 at the end of 2019. The improvement there is largely due to the lower cost of natural gas, which is factored into the days cash on hand calculation. Another important measure is the debt service coverage. The district continues to be in compliance with our requirements related to this. As shown here, you can see the debt service coverage for both gas and water exceeds the 1.2 threshold, with water at 3.57 times and gas at 21.18 times.
Hey, Mark, can I interrupt you real quick, just to make sure I understand? I think I forgot, actually. The debt service requirements right now, say the first one, water debt service coverage is 3.57 times. Our debt service, I understand what that is, but what is covering it 3.7 times? Is that net income, revenues, or what?
It's the operating cash generated during the current year. So it's like a cash net income figure, generally speaking. So yeah, it would be your cash generated from operations in the current year compared to the annual average debt service requirements. And you do notice it did go down slightly in the gas department this year. And looking at that measure annually, we actually had generated about $5 million less in cash in the gas department operationally than we did in 2019, which is what caused that to go down just slightly.
Okay, so thank you. It's basically cash versus net income.
Yes, because net income does include some non-cash items such as those pension adjustments, such as depreciation and things of that nature. We start with net income and adjust it for some of those items to get to a cash operating figure that is used to compare to the debt service.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and then we continue to receive favorable credit ratings from the three primary rating agencies. In December of 2020, Fitch affirmed its AA plus rating for the district on the gas revenue bonds. And in October, Moody's affirmed its AA2 rating for both the gas and water revenue bonds. And then with your support, we continue to fulfill our promises to our employees related to pension and OPEB plan funding. I'm pleased to report that the funded ratio for the pension plan this year improved from 89% to 94%. And Pat Beckham from Kavanaugh McDonald is here, and we'll speak more about that here in a few minutes. And then in addition to that, the district contributed $11.6 million to the OPEB trust. As a reminder, this trust was created back in 2016 to begin building funds to pay for future retiree medical benefits. We're currently paying for those on a pay-as-you-go basis. And since the trust was created, the balance has grown to about $60 million at the end of 2020. And that's up $19 million from the balance at the end of 2019. So I would just conclude by saying the district came through 2020 extremely well and was in a solid financial position going into 2021. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
I would like to just say thank you, Mark. Great review. I think that last sheet, the financial stability, the key measures, that's a tremendous sheet that, you know, as board members we look at. Those are key factors that indicate how solid financially the company M.U.D is in. And 2020, as you said, was financially a success, but it took a lot of hard work and commitment from all employees to get this success. And so on behalf of the board, I would like to thank all the employees for their commitment and hard work to have these key measures pointed out to us and the success we had in 2020 despite the challenges we had. Great job.
Mark, I have a question. Mark Myers, you made reference to bad debt being partially attributable to the pandemic. I'm just curious what else would be contributing to that.
I would say that is probably the primary factor. We did, monitor our accounts receivable throughout the year and continue to do that on a weekly basis. We did see some growing in the aging of that over time, which caused some additional bad debt expense to occur. And we basically reserved for that through the year based on the level of past due accounts. And then at the end of the year, we'll conduct a write-off process for amounts that are uncollectible. But yeah, I think that's probably the primary factor. We have, as we continue to monitor the receivables aging, seen some improvement since then. There was as you look at our aging at the end of November, we really peaked at where we had about, we look at the accounts receivable balance over 30 days old, and at the end of November, that was about 45% of the total receivable. Looking at it now, it's more about 27% of the total, so we have seen some improvement since then.
Mark, is some of that relief due to the federal COVID relief funding, the money that's come in to help people who have gotten behind?
Yes, you are correct. That has definitely had an impact and has helped our customers. That initial CARES Act funding that we received through both the county and the state, we were able to. Our customers were able to benefit by about $2.1 million from that. There was the additional $1 million that has come through Douglas County, and I think most recent numbers I saw, we've awarded about $723,000 of that $1 million, with additional still to be distributed. So those federal programs have definitely helped, and the other customer assistance that we make available through the Home Fund and other sources as well.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, this is Mark Doyle, President, and members of the board. Thank you for your comments and for your support and your confidence. As some of the board members know, 10 years ago, our WER funds, our encumbered funds that we collect from our customers, weren't in the position they should have been. So several years back, we adopted 5 pillars, and they are to maintain adequate cash reserves, which we had them, but no one really knew what they were or what they should be. To be in debt covenants, we are now in compliance. And I would say when you look at the ratios that Director McGowan asked about, any employee at M.U.D. can understand that and understand why that's critically important, and all these things are to keeping promises to our employees so they can enjoy their retirement for the rest of their lives. And to be able to say that the answer is operating cash generated in the current year and annual average debt service requirements, that's an understandable performance indicator. So those things are important to me, because if you don't understand them, you can't manage them. Infrastructure replacement was the third pillar. We're on a great path for rehabilitation and replacement of our infrastructure, and I would say we are expending funds, and we have a plan for infrastructure, and not everyone in the company does. You know, the gas side, we're on a great path. The water side, we're working toward 25 miles by the year 25 or the end of the year. The next pillar, promises to our employees. I'm so proud of this company and for the board of directors to support what we need to do, and we can say we're 94% funded. That is That's really something. So thanks to everyone for their work and support. And lastly, but most importantly, we want to maintain this public utility as being affordable to everyone. We are a utility with heart, and even though our receivables have went up and down, they're on the correct path now. If anyone contacts us, we'll work with them. It's that simple. So I'm not only proud of the company and the board support, but our customers always do what we need them to do in helping to fund what we need to do to keep these life essential services affordable forever. So thank you for the comments. Thank you, Mark, for the review. I know it takes a while, but it's extremely important. So thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the comments. Excuse me. Any other questions for Mark? Then let's move on to talk about the pension, insurance, and pension report from Joe Shafford. He'll introduce the actuarial evaluation report on the retirement plan.
Good morning, Joe Shafford. I serve as the district's chief financial officer. So behind tab 13 are several documents that are contributing to the weight and the volume of the board binder this month. The first of those is the actuarial evaluation report for the pension plan. The second is what the accountants affectionately refer to as the GASB 67 and 68 report. It's what provides accounting guidance around pension expense recognition. And the final document is a document that Pat Beckham will present momentarily that's basically a summary or the highlights of the valuation report. I'm going to make just a couple of comments on two of these documents, and then I'll turn the virtual floor over to Ms. Beckham. So the actual evaluation report, very comprehensive, 47-page report that contains an excellent executive summary on pages 1 through 10. As I mentioned, a lot of great information in this document. In my mind, there are two key highlights or takeaways. The first of those is this document provides us with what the district's actual required contribution is to the pension plan. For 2021, that number is just shy of $9.5 million. As a comparison, last year's actual required contribution was $11 million, so it's about a $1.5 million drop in required contribution. Several things driving it, a couple things of note. The first is the investment experience that we had in 2020. As Mark indicated, the pension earned about just shy of 14%. That has an impact on what we need to contribute to continue down the path of funding the pension plan. In fact, that contributed to approximately a $1 million reduction in the required contribution. The other thing that is occurring and has been going on for a number of years is the percent that employees contribute towards the pension plan. In 2021, employees will contribute 8% of covered payroll. That is up from 7.5% in 2020. That 0.5% increase lowers the required contribution by about $350,000. The board may recall this employee contribution will increase 0.5% until this percent reaches 9% in 2023, and that is pursuant to the labor agreement for the period April 1 of 18 through March 31 of 2023. I should note that despite the actuaries telling us we need to contribute $9.5 million. The 2021 budget assumes a contribution of $11.6 million. And again, since last year's required was 11, we don't count on an investment experience any better than what we assume, so we certainly don't budget for that kind of benefit. And we always count on payroll increasing a bit, which will drive increased contributions to the pension plan. So the budget actually includes $2.1 million more than what the actuary is saying we have to contribute. As a point of reference, in 2020, the district contributed $12.3 million to the pension plan, as opposed to the $11.0 million that was required. Management is recommending that we contribute at budgeted levels, the $11.6 million, again, approximately $2.1 million higher than required. Again, with our desire to continue down the path of increasing the percent funded that the pension plan is. The caveat that I will introduce is in the event we would experience a financial surprise in 2021, We certainly would have the flexibility with board approval to lower the 11.6 million contribution. We don't do that contribution in lump sum. We do it on a monthly basis. So there would be time throughout the year to adjust this number. The board may recall that we behaved that way, in fact, in 2020. The budget actually included a contribution of $13.6 million. And with the onset of the pandemic, we lowered that to $12.3 million, which again was $1.3 million higher than what the actuarial contribution required. So the second takeaway from that actuarial valuation report.
Can I? Yes. Sorry to interrupt you. Here's a question I have for you. The $2.1 million in the budget over the actuarial recommended funding level is great. I think in the past we've done that and contributed to keep building up our funded level of the pension. But have you ever thought about, instead, this year with our being at 94% funded and we're moving pretty good, have you ever thought about contributing that excess amount to the OPEB fund?
You know, that's an interesting comment. What we do, Director McGowan, is we guide contributions by the actuarial guidance. And again, if you contribute at a level at least equal to what the actuary says, you are on a plan to fully fund that at some point in time. Obviously, we are much less mature on the OPEB side, but that's an interesting point. That's something we could consider. Again, the pension plan, the OPEB will be affected somewhat down the road by the fact that the benefit changed slightly for employees hired after a certain date. But that's an interesting point. It's something we could certainly consider. I would want to consult with the actuary to get her take on that as well. But the other thing I might comment, though, Director McGowan, and this comment will not result in a change in the actual required contribution for 2021. But you know, we've also talked about considering lowering the return assumptions from 6.9 to something slightly lower. And again, when you do that, it lowers your discount rate, which means your today's liability grows because of the lower discount rate. If we would implement that either later this year or early next, that would affect your funded percentage. So some of this excess would hopefully hold the line on our funded percentage as well. There's a lot of moving parts that I just mentioned, Director McGowan. But
yeah, that's what
you know,
I was thinking too. There is a lot of moving parts, and you know, I've been a proponent of reducing our target rate of return from 6.9 down to maybe 6.8 or 6.75. Later on there'll be graphs that show how our target return compares to others, and we're in a good spot, but not in the best spot, and so I'd like to move that down. So that extra 2.1 million is kind of a cushion for that, but I also know that we strive to fund our OPEB a lot, so that's why I said there's a lot of moving parts. I'd just like you to think about it, and I defer to your judgment, really, as to you and management, what we should do. But I just got thinking maybe that'd be an interesting thing to throw that money at the OPEB this year instead of the pension. But if you have plans to reduce the target rate of return and need this for a cushion, I fully understand.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about this, as you're aware, in the Insurance and Pensions Committee for some period of time, and the right approach, I think, is a gradual reduction. But as you know, when you consider that a pension plan is a plan in perpetuity, when you change a discount rate, it can have a pretty dramatic impact on that liability, which, of course, would translate into a different funded percentage, potentially.
Well, just think about it and maybe get back to me sometime or report back to the board next month how you balance all those moving parts and what you think is best overall for the employees and for the company.
Very well. We will do that.
Thank you.
The second takeaway from this valuation report is something that Mark spoke to, and that's the funded ratio increasing from 89.3% to 94%. Again, it's consistent with our pillar of keeping promises to employees, and it's also, I'll say, accommodation to the board's support for keeping this plan funded as appropriate. We all read of other funds that are not funded this way, so I feel very good about our funded percentage. The second document behind this tab is the accounting-related report, the GASB 67 and 8 document, which prescribes the manner in which you recognize pension expense. And when you see my memo, you may think it's a typographical error, but pension expense was in fact negative in 2020 of $3.8 million. There's many contributors to this because the guidance is fairly complex and it has you track several different things that contribute to pension expense recognition. But I would say the primary driver of it being negative is the difference between assumed return on the pension plan versus actual return. Each year when you do accounting for this, you compare assumed versus actual, and you create a layer that gets spread over 5 years so you don't have this herky-jerky motion in your pension expense. But with that said, we've had higher than assumed returns in 2016, 17, 19, and 20. 2018 was actually lower, so that creates a negative layer that would offset these positive layers. But that combined is what is resulting, or is the primary driver of negative pension expense. And as Mark alluded to, I'm not discounting that. It's certainly proper accounting per the guidance. I happen to put a little bit more stock in the cash side of it, which is the actuarial required contribution. We run the business from a cash flow perspective, but certainly in order to produce financial statements that comply with the guidance, we certainly adhere to all of these guidelines. The other thing that the GASB report does is provide yet another funding or funded percentage. It talks about planned net fiduciary position, which is based on the market value of pension assets as compared to pension liability, and that's actually over 100% now. Again, the percentage that gets reported to the state is the one that's based on actuarial funding, which is the 94%. So again, both are very, very, very healthy. And then the final document is a document that Pat Beckham will be speaking to. Pat is the principal and consulting actuary with Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting, and I will do my best to share Pat's presentation, and I will flip slides at her direction as soon as I can find this.
Hey, Joe. Joe, can I ask a question real quick before you turn it over to Pat?
Yes.
On page 2 of your report, you show that, according to GASB 6768, we're 101% funded, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the other number is 94%. If we're asked publicly, what is your funded position? Do we say 94% or do we say 101%? How do we, if we're asked by somebody in our rate district or subdivision, what's the right response, or do we give them both and explain it?
Well, in my view, Mike, the most relevant one is 94% because that is what the state keeps track of. That's the percentage that if you're below 80%, you get summoned to the state to talk about your plan to improve that funding. So in my view, they're both correct, but the one that has been used for a considerable period of time is the actuarial funded percentage.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
And I am having trouble sharing this document. So bear with me 1 second. It was working fine until I needed to do it.
I can bring it up,
Mark
Joe.
And Sue. Yeah, could you do that, please? Thanks, Sue. Sorry for the technological glitch here. Thanks, Sue.
This is Pat
Are you muted? There we go.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, good morning, board members, staff, other interested parties. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I did not get to attend last year, and I missed you all. So it's good to be back. I'm a little worried because Mr. Shafford is getting so good at summarizing our reports that I'm not sure I'll be needed in the next year or two. So he's done a fabulous job of hitting the high points, and I know you're probably strapped for time. So I think I'm going to hit just a couple of slides reinforcing some concepts that have really already been discussed by Mr. Myers and Mr. Shafford, but we'll kind of keep this moving. Just briefly on the first slide, just remember what the process is about, and Mr. Shafford talked about this. This is, the obligations in this plan are very, very long-term. Those obligations or liabilities are really the promises to pay benefits in the future. The challenge for us as actuaries and for you as plan sponsor is we don't know what those benefit payments are, the amount. We don't know exactly when they'll start, how long they'll be paid. We use all these actuarial assumptions to try to give us sort of a best estimate of what those are, but they're simply assumptions, and we know from year to year actual experience will vary from what is assumed or expected. And that's why we do these valuations annually. We capture everything that happened in the last 12 months, and we sort of recalibrate the glide path to get to 100% funded in our target time frame. That variability of actual experience versus expected is what we in the actuarial profession call risk. It's just uncertainty. It can be good, as you'll see this year. It could be bad. So next slide, please. And I think Mr. Shafford covered this. The employee contribution rate increased 8% in 2021. That started with the bargaining agreement in 2018. Will continue to increase 0.5% till we reach 9% in 2023. We calculate the actuarial contribution, subtract off the employee contribution rate, and the district contribution is the remaining amount. Next slide, please. And we've talked a lot on the investment return, very strong for 2020. Nobody would have predicted that a year ago. 14%. Again, the smooth value is called the actuarial value. The return on the smooth value, because we don't recognize all the experience on market, was 10%, which is still well above the assumption of 6.9. That generated in terms of dollars, an actuarial gain, experience better than expected by the assumptions of 14 million. But we also had an actuarial gain on liabilities, and that means the liabilities were lower than expected. That was largely due to lower salary increases than the assumption would have anticipated, and lower COLAs than expected. Our COLA assumption is 2.6%, and I think for the year, the increase in benefits was about 1.4. So this is a really good year. I'm happy to be able to report favorably. Assets outperformed, liabilities were lower, total actuarial gain of 20 million. If we look at the difference between the market value of assets and the smooth value, market value is higher by 42 million. That gives us kind of a nice cushion in case things get a little crazy or ugly in 2021. That return on market for 2021 could be as low as a -2%, and we would still hit the 6.9% assumption on the actuarial value. And that's why we do the smoothing, because we know markets are way up and way down, so we don't recognize all the good or bad experience at one time. The next slide, please. And you've heard these numbers before. So the unfunded actuarial liability is the difference between the actuarial liability, or the target, kind of where the asset should be based on our funding plan, and the actuarial or smooth value. So the difference between those is 30 million. And then the funded ratio is actuarial or market value divided by actuarial liability. And you've seen that 94% number before. On a market value basis, we're over 102%. And you can see what those numbers were for last year. Very strong investment performance obviously moves the funded ratio up. Next slide, please. The district contribution, and Mr. Shafford covered these numbers with you, but you can see the total contribution rate is just under 22%, down from the January 1, 2020 valuation. Again, when you have favorable experience, lower liabilities, higher assets, your unfunded liability is lower, and that means you don't have to put as much money into the plan to reach your funding goal at the same point in time. And that's what we're seeing reflected with that 2.16% decrease. You can see the employee contribution rate increased from 7.5% in the 2020 valuation to 8% this year. When you subtract that off the total contribution, you get the employer or district contribution rate, 13.91. So it's 2.66% lower than the 2020 valuation. We take that times the estimated payroll. That's based on actuarial assumptions. That's not a number we get from the district. And you can see the 9.5 million that Mr. Shafford talked about earlier, down about 1.6 million from the actuarially determined contribution last year. As Mr. Shafford noted, the district has sort of implemented what I would call an informal policy of contributing the budgeted amount if that's higher than the actuarial amount. And that was done to both sort of stabilize the contribution, avoid the ups and downs that come with, in particular asset return experience, and to try to move the retirement plan toward full funding sooner than the target. So you'll see that has worked out very well. And it's really a great policy, even if though it's not informal, it has been followed, I think, for at least 8 or 9 years. Next slide, please. So we talked about favorable experience this year on both the investment side and the demographic side, and that this middle section of this table sort of focuses on that experience, both the funded ratio, the numbers on the right-hand side, and the district's contribution rate, the numbers in the first column of numbers. And we've been over all these numbers before, but I think it's worth noting that, the actual experience compared to what was expected was a decrease in the contribution rate of over 2% and an increase in the funded ratio of almost 4%. And a 4% move in the funded ratios is a pretty big move in 1 year. Next slide. And I think this one actually Mr. Shafford covered quite well, and we don't need to talk about that one. Next slide. This is sort of the historical funded ratio for the M.U.D plan. This has been, a really well-managed plan for a long, long time. And you can see in the first part of this period, the funded ratios were actually over 100%. Timing's everything. There was a benefit enhancement in 2007, and then we all know what happened in 2008. And that dropped the funded ratio down kind of in the low 80s. We've been working our way up. We're back to 94% in this valuation. This is actually a great story to tell. A lot of plans would love to have this funded ratio chart. Next slide, please. So this is showing the actuarially determined contribution, the blue bars, and then the actual contribution that the district made, which is the red line. So you can see back in about 2012 that the red line is higher than the blue bar. And that's when that sort of informal stable contribution policy, or whatever you want to call it, was implemented, again, to try to even out some of the up and down in the contribution, as well as improve the funded ratio. And it's worked very well, and hopefully has been good on the budget side for the district. Next slide. This is just a very, very simplified projection of district contributions to reinforce that the investment return, what actually happens on the investment side, is so very important to what happens on the contribution side. And I always tell people, you only pay benefits from two sources. It's either contributions or investment income. So if investment income is higher than expected, your contributions will go down. And if your investment returns are lower than expected, your contributions have to go up because you have to recoup it. And that's really what this graph is showing. The blue line is if all actuarial assumptions are met every single year. I can tell you that will not happen exactly like that. But this is more of a sensitivity analysis, a what if. If that does happen, you can see that the blue line decreases in the first few years there. And that's because we have the remaining increase in the employee contribution, and we have deferred gains kind of flowing through. So it forces it down, and then it just goes up because payroll goes up. And the green scenario is, a happy scenario, a 10% return for the 3 years from 2021 through 23. Obviously, if you're earning more than 6.9, it's going to drive the contributions down. It's a little bit like you're driving from Omaha to North Platte, but you're going to get to North Platte in exactly 5 hours. So if you get to Grand Island and you're ahead of schedule, you get off the interstate and decide to eat or something, because you're going to get to North Platte in exactly 5 hours. So if we get ahead, we have better returns, we put less money in the future, because we're going to get fully funded in the same 23-year period. Next slide, please. Just wrap up. We've talked about everything, on the top part of this. Again, the challenge with funding any of these pension plans is the volatility that happens on the asset side of the house, and that sort of stabilizing the contributions was an attempt to sort of manage the volatility that comes with investing in the market. It's not perfect, because we've all seen what's happened with volatility on market returns, but it has really improved the funding of M.U.D's plan, and you really should be proud of that. And that's the secret. I don't care what retirement plan it is, if you don't make contributions to it as you are supposed to or need to, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter if you have a 401k plan or a pension plan. And so that discipline has really paid off for the district. And Mr. Shafford mentioned this, but I also wanted to let you know there is a statutory requirement that a comprehensive experience to be performed at least every 4 years. And so we're due to perform that quadrennial experience study later this year. We'll be starting that probably kind of the beginning of the summer is our thought. We'll look at all assumptions, including investment return. We'll also be looking at the mortality assumption because there is a new mortality table that's been published that is based solely on public plan data. We have never had that before in the actuarial universe of mortality tables. So we'll also be looking at that. So there could be changes that come from the experience study. They would be reflected in the January 1, 2022 valuation and impact the costs in 22, not the current year. The rest of the information is sort of supplemental information that might be of interest. I did not intend to cover it unless anybody has a question. And I know I went through that pretty quick, but I know you have a full morning. So any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Pat, this is Mike. Good to hear from you again. I wish you were here in person, but I have one comment and then 2 or 3 questions. Okay. The comment I have is that Gwen Howard is chair of the pension committee that I'm on too, and we work very closely with Vanguard to manage our valuation of our pension so that we have a balanced portfolio. And so we're trying to have a balanced portfolio so we're not so subject to the volatility of the market. If we stick to our balanced portfolio, then we can weather some storms. And Vanguard is very good at making recommendations and managing our portfolio and bringing us back in line with our target to balance our risk on that. So I feel like that pension committee works real close with Vanguard to achieve that. And then secondly, in the quadrennial experience study, will you be looking at the 6.9 target rate of return, how that stacks up and whether we should be adjusting that or not?
Yes, Director McGowan, thank you for your question. We will be looking at the investment return assumption as well as all the other assumptions that we use in the valuation. We will look at the asset allocation that you have developed with Vanguard's assistance, and we'll look at Vanguard's expected returns over the short term and the long term to help develop a recommendation on that. And that will be a fairly in-depth analysis, and we will share that with the pension committee.
Great. So you will be making a recommendation whether we stick with 6.9 or reduce it a little bit or what?
Yes, that will be part of our experience study. And just to clarify, our job is to sort of do the analysis and make a recommendation. Ultimately, the board has to decide what specific assumptions to adopt, but we will have a recommendation.
Good. That helps us make that decision, so I appreciate that. Now, I do have a couple questions on your supplemental information. On page 15, second line down, UAL contribution. What's UAL?
Yes, and I apologize. In the pension world, we have an awful lot of abbreviations and acronyms. It stands for the unfunded actuarial liability.
Okay.
So on page 5, when we went over the funded status of the plan, you can see there was a $30 million unfunded liability. So we have a payment plan to extinguish that over time. Every year there's a payment that's made. This is sort of like the plan's debt. And so we have a mortgage payment, so to speak, to pay off that debt over a period of time. And that's what the UAL contribution rate is.
Okay, because I saw it's part of our 13.91. I just wanted to make sure I understood what that was. Thank you.
Yes.
Then on page 16, you got these 3 graphs, and on the bottom there you have MVA, AVA, and assumed. What's MVA, AVA mean? What do they stand for?
Next year I will put a footnote on the bottom because I should have done that. MVA just stands for market value of assets.
Okay.
So that's a return on market. AVA stands for the actuarial value of assets, the smooth value. So the red line is return on the actuarial value. And then the green line is whatever the assumption was used in the valuation, that's the green line. So since you brought this up, you can see that the blue line is up and down and all around. It's rarely anywhere close to the green line. And then the red line still moves, but it moves much less. And that's exactly why we're using an asset smoothing method, is to average out some of the ups and downs that happen on the market value returns, because volatility in returns translates directly to volatility on the contributions. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, so you can see the blue line is quite volatile, the red line is smoother, and the green line is when we did the calculations in the valuation, what we would have assumed or expected to happen in that year. Does that answer your question, Director McGowan?
Yes, it does. I appreciate that very much. And then the last thing I want to do is point the board to and just make sure we all look at page 22 and 23, because that's just a nice picture of where we stand with our funded ratio. On page 22, with our M.U.D. on page 22, our target rate of return is 6.9%. Certainly lower than some like Omaha Police and Fire and Omaha Public Schools. The higher that percent is, it's harder to be funded where we're at. And we're at 6.9, and then you have like Metro, they're at 6.5. And we talked about maybe moving that down, 6.75 or something like that. I think we need to keep our focus on that 6.9, try to move it down a little bit. We're not terrible, but we're not perfect either. And then on page 23, that's one I like to look at too. That shows our funded percent, 94%. There's only one other one, the Central Nebraska Public Power, that's higher than us, and City of Ralston's equal to us, but that shows pretty doggone good where we stand, and we ought to be proud of that. Omaha Public Schools in the paper every day about their unfunded position in their pension and what the problems they have on that. So our focus in the last few years, getting that funded percent up and to keep that focus on is paramount to us keeping our promise to our employees. And then I guess one last thing I'd like to say, closing remark, and then I'll be quiet. We are all very proud to state that our employee pension is funded at 94%. But I think we need to recognize and thank our employees for their incremental funding and contribution to the success of this 94%. Their increased funding helps us get there too, and I just want to thank the employees for that. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay. Pat, thank you very much. Always good to hear from you, especially when we have good news like this.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Okay, Joe Shafford, you're one item away from a break.
Yes, so I'll keep that in mind. Again, Joe Shafford, serving as the Chief Financial Officer for the district. Behind tab 14 is the audited financial statements, as well as memos that are directed to the board that are directed at the governance role the board plays as it relates to these financial matters. So the financial statements, so despite the fact that you have an 82-page document that's bound with RSM's cover page on it, I want to make it clear that it's the district's responsibility to prepare these financial statements, and that's not at all intended to diminish the very important role that RSM plays. But I think sometimes when people see a document like this, they assume the public accounting firm prepares this. And this is Mark Myers and his team, Cheryl Rippey and others, that prepare and set lemons. Every page in this document, with the exception of the audit opinion, is prepared by district staff. I'm pleased to report that RSM has expressed an unmodified or clean audit opinion, which means that our financial statements present fairly the financial position of both the gas and water departments at the end of 2020. And both Kevin Smith, the audit assurance partner, and Robert Kreitzer, the audit engagement manager, are joining us virtually today. And Robert is going to be making some additional comments. So I'll turn it to you, Robert.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Yeah, I just want to take a second here to go through our required communications to those charged with governance. As you've heard today, Mark and Joe really talked through a lot of things related to the financials, as well as Joe just mentioning the opinions. But first, I do just want to take a second to note all the hard work that Joe and Mark and their teams put in this year. As you guys know, it's been a very unique 12 months. And we did our audit fully remote this year, which is a change to how it's been done in the past. So that really went off without any changes due to the hard work of Mark and Joe and their team. So I just really want to commend them. They allow the audit process to go smooth. As Joe mentioned, we did issue a clean or unmodified opinion this year on our audit, which is over both major funds of gas and water, the fiduciary funds of the pension and OPEB, as well as the business type activities. If you look through our letter to those charged with governance, I just want to go through that, talk a little bit about our responsibilities. We do audit under two sets of standards. Our auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, which is that clean or unmodified opinion, as well as government auditing standards. And the government auditing standards, if you go to page 3 of that letter, is our report on internal control over financial reporting. And essentially, the government auditing standards requires us to do additional work over internal controls, and happy to report that there was no control deficiencies, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses related to the district. Also in that letter, we go through significant accounting policies as well as significant accounting estimates. This year, there were no new GASB pronouncements or Government Accounting Standard Board pronouncements. There were none adopted in the current year, and this was due to GASB 95, which was essentially kind of a COVID relief GASB, which pushed everything back. So you will see new GASBs adopted next year. And then there we have our list of management's accounting estimates, and they include depreciable life of capital assets, the fair value of investments, unbilled revenue, and then the assumptions of both the pension and the OPEB. So we do additional work around all of these estimates to ensure that management's estimates are appropriate, as well as have our internal actuaries look at those assumptions and have discussions with Pat. And again, there were no issues with any of those management assumptions in the current year. There were also no audit adjustments and no uncorrected misstatements in the current year. I've already spoke about our internal control matters here, which again, there were no internal control issues. We did not consult with any other accountants. And that's really everything. So I know that was pretty quick. So if you have any questions for me or Kevin in regards to the communications or in regards to the audit report, happy to answer those, and I appreciate your time.
Any questions? No questions here. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is Joe still there?
Thank you.
Are we?
Joe is still here.
Okay.
But that concludes the information behind tab 14.
Okay, let me just say that Joe, Mark, and your entire team, thank you for your commitment to keeping accurate books and working hard and doing your job the right way. Having worked for Enron, I have a great appreciation of good bookkeeping and good audits, and I thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, and thanks to Mark and his team.
Thank you.
Okay, any board members have any further comments? Due to COVID-related precautions, members of the public have access to this meeting via WebEx connection that is set up in a nearby conference room at the headquarters building. Are there any members of the public present who would like to address the board? And if so, please indicate your intentions to the moderator.
Director McGowan, this is Pat Catalano, greeting the public. We had Mike Leffler here early this morning. He had no questions. He had to leave early, but he said he will see us next month.
Okay.
No one else has attended.
Thank you, Patrick. The committee meetings have now concluded. It is 10:25. We will reconvene at 10:35. Thank you. All right, let's get started. Sorry for a little bit of delay. I was walking in and my hand hit the doorknob and I dropped half a glass of water, so Mary had to go get something to clean it up. Our first meeting back and I kind of fumble it, so. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Mike McGowan, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the regular monthly board meeting this morning, April 7th, 2021. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and the recording will be uploaded and available for viewing on the M.U.D website following today's meeting. I'd like to announce that due to the Governor's extended executive order suspending in-person meeting requirements under the Nebraska Open Meetings Act, board members are permitted to participate remotely if they so choose. The extension of this ordinance will remain in effect until April 30th. And today, live in the boardroom, we have Directors Begley, Kavanaugh, Frost, Friend, and McGowan, and Directors Cook and Howard are participating remotely. I would like to remind those attending in person at the board meeting today that we must abide by the City Council ordinance requiring all those attending in person today wear a face mask or face covering or maintain 6-foot distancing from one another in indoor public settings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This ordinance will remain in effect until May 25th, 2021. Mary, could we have a roll call, please?
McGowan.
Here.
Howard. Kavanaugh.
Here.
Begley.
Here.
Cook. Friend.
Here. I can barely hear you, though.
Hear you. Friend.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
Did you get when Director Howard?
Howard is here, but I can't hear you, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're all here. You got them all?
Got it.
Okay. Open Meetings Act. I'd like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available in the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in the nearby room set aside for members of the public who may attend. And now, for those who wish to participate, we'd like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes for committee meetings and regular monthly board meetings.
I move for approval. Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
McGowan.
Here.
Howard.
Yes, I mean.
Howard is here.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Begley.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Operation.
Chairman McGowan, this is Mark Doyle. I have a question for the boardroom. Can we do a sound check on Mary so Directors Cook and Howard could hear her? She's very, I can hardly hear her too. You're welcome.
Test.
Mary?
Okay. Yes.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Travis, we can hardly hear Mary. Is she on a headphone or? Thank you.
Try it, Mary. See if that.
Test.
A little better? Maybe?
He's replacing something.
Microphone.
Okay. Thank you.
Whoa.
Test.
That's somewhat better.
Okay.
We'll ask her to speak up, though.
Yeah,
Maybe that'll
please.
help. All right, Director Frost?
Thanks.
Okay, capital expenditures. Item 5. These were discussed in committee and I move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
McGowan.
Yes.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Begley.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes. Item number 6, acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates. These were discussed in committee. I move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes. Item 7, bids on materials and contracts, discussed in committee. Move for approval.
With the exception.
No, this is...
That's for bids.
Yeah, Director Frost,
Yep.
I believe
okay.
the recommendation would be lay over the construction
Yeah.
phase inspection services for 1 month.
Okay, I'll buy that. I move for approval of the bids as presented by John Zellers in his letter dated March 26, 2021, with the exception of the bid submitted by JEO Consulting for construction phase inspection services for contracted water mains, which will be held over until next month's board meeting pending further review.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes. Item 7, capital expenditures for lease of...
It's actually item 8, agenda item 8.
I'm sorry, you're right, 8. I'm for capital expenditures for lease of 14242C Circles, discussed in committee. Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Item number 9, services and extensions, discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. O'Brien dated March 29th.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Item 10, wage and/or salary increases and ratifications. I move for approval of the items presented in the memo from Bonnie Savine dated March 26, 2021, and discussed in committee.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Item number 11, I move we approve the proposed property lease for the Family Focus Federal Credit Union as discussed by Mark Mendenhall.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
I just think it's a really cool relationship that M.U.D has had with the credit union, and 90 years strong, and looking forward to many more years together.
Yeah, that's
And have a nice
before I
little
was
office
born.
here for the employees?
Yes, yes.
Very good. Any further discussion? Roll call?
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Item 12, I would like to request that we place on file the third legislative report dated March 22nd, 2021, as presented by Mr. Kubat.
Second.
No vote necessary.
We don't need action on
Moving
that.
on.
Item 13?
Agenda item number 13, would like to request that the actuarial report and the GATSB 67 and 68 report be placed on file. Secondly, I move to approve the contribution to the pension plan consistent with the management's recommendation.
Second.
Discussion?
Thank you.
I want to ask clarification because I had a question on the contribution level. I didn't have a question on the amount. I questioned whether it should be applied to the pension or the OPEB and asked management to get back to us on that. So do I have to clarify that?
No.
No? Okay, then I'm okay with the level of contribution. Any other discussion? Okay, item 14, audited financial.
We take a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roll call.
Roll call.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
What are we voting on? I thought we were placing it on file.
No, we're on item 13, the actuarial contribution.
Correct.
The level of contribution to the plan.
So we're approving that today?
Yes.
All right,
We
yes.
place on file the actuarial report and the gas.
Yeah, the report's on file, but this is the funding level.
Funding level, okay, yes.
Okay, McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
Item 14, the agenda item 14, the audited financial statement. I would like to request that the 2020 audited financial statement be placed on file. Item number 15, other matters of district business for discussion. We will now hear from the Director of Energy Acquisitions, David Bellers, who will provide an overview of the Central Plains Energy Project, also known as CPEP. David?
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let me share my screen real quick. My name is Dave Bellairs. I am the Director of Energy Acquisitions in the Gas Operations Department. And today I'm going to talk about Central Plains Energy. Central Plains was formed in 2006 under the Nebraska Interlocal Act. At that time, M.U.D, along with Cedar Falls, Iowa, and Hastings, Nebraska, are the three members of Central Plains. You can kind of see we have a mission statement there to provide low-cost, reliable, long-term supplies of natural gas. And to date, we've been very successful at that. Just a little bit more background on CPEP. It does have a board acting under the Interlocal Act. We have open meetings, and every member assigns a board representative and alternate. For the M.U.D, the CPEP board member is Jim Knight, who's the Vice President of Gas Operations, and the alternate officer would be myself, filling in his absence. Part of the CPEP formation is members decide what projects to participate in and at what levels to participate in. Each member has one vote, so for the board, there's 3 votes total on everything that the board votes on. Each project has committees that do make recommendations to the board, and then the board has to approve those. And just kind of a little bit background on these prepays. Since 2005, there have been 73 different prepays completed across the United States for just under $49 billion, and over 450 different municipal entities have participated in those transactions. So the operations of CPEP, CPEP does have some outside engagements. I just kind of want to highlight a few key ones. One is Gilmore Bell, who the board may be familiar with as they act as bond counsel for M.U.D. For Central Plains, they act as our Nebraska counsel, and they make sure we're following the Interlocal Act and help us with any contractual issues and things like that that we need help with. Another key associate, it would be Hayes and Associates. They do the outside accounting services. So they keep our general ledgers and things like that for Central Plains. And then the last thing I want to point out that BKD is our external auditor, and we do have annual audits performed, just like you just approved for the district. Just a little bit more discussion on this. The day-to-day operations of CPEP are managed by M.U.D staff. Patrick Brennan, who's the gas transportation coordinator, myself, and then Jim Knight are the 3 people who are tasked with the daily operations of CPEP. We do have, just like we were discussing earlier in the meeting, a separate charge account or cost center that we bill our time to when we're serving duties associated with Central Plains, and then CPEP does reimburse the district for that. Our engagement is currently an annual agreement that we do every June, renew that, and we have been doing this since 2008. This slide shows the current projects that we have been completed by Central Plains. You can kind of see we have from 2007, 20-year project. All the other projects are a 30-year. I just kind of want to point out a few things. This 2003C was the term that was used was a crossover funding. Essentially, we were able to, the CPEP 3 project had a bond call option at 10 years. And prior to the tax law changes, we were able to do an early refunding of that to increase our discounts. We will start to see those discounts in 2022 when that crossover occurs in, I believe, November. Currently, CPEP has $2.4 billion of outstanding debt that we have issued. And to date, we have issued just under $4.3 billion of bonds. I just kind of want to note that these bonds are all on CPEP's ledger and not on M.U.D. M.U.D. nor any of the other participants are liable to the bondholders for any repayment if any of these transactions were to come down. M.U.D. and all the participants only pay for gas that is delivered. If there's any failure to deliver, then the gas supplier makes up those funds. This chart just kind of shows the discounts to market rates that CPEP or that M.U.D. has achieved through CPEP. As you can see, it started in 2007. We only had the one project, is why the total savings are lower those years, and they grow throughout. Let me see, I have a little note here. So from 2007 to 2020, M.U.D. has achieved $92 million in discounts. You'll see some larger increases in 2009, 2012. That's from this project one. We were able to do some unwinds and move and basically reduce future volumes and take those savings to current dollars. In 2014 was a refinance of our project 2. And as part of that, we received an upfront payment of those discounts as part of a settlement on litigation that we had at that time. You do see over here a different color. There are other prepay projects that M.U.D. has participated in outside of Central Plains. They are Black Belt, which is located in Clark Mobile, Alabama, TEAC, which is the Tennessee Energy Acquisition Corporation, and PEAK, which is the Public Energy Authority of Kentucky. This is a 5-year projection of additional discounts. As you can kind of see, I mentioned earlier with that CPEP 3C, in 2022, we see the discounts increase, and then even more in 2023 when we have those discounts over 12 months. Right now, we are projecting from 2021 to 2025 an additional savings of $40 million for M.U.D. and our customers. And then just kind of finishing up here, we are currently looking at a project 5, possibly in the next 12 months. Market conditions are improving that allow the spread between taxable and tax-exempt bonds to generate discounts sufficient to our interest. And overall, M.U.D.'s goal is to have 75 to 80% of our gas supplies in prepaid. We don't want to go all the way to 100% because that could result in warmer than average years, us having additional supplies that we can generate the required tax sales to our retail customers with. Another note to this is if we ever have declining sales due to loss of load, there are provisions in all these contracts that allow us to put back a portion of those volumes that then the gas supplier has to go out and remarket. One other thing that is important for the board we wanted to talk about today is there is potential for electric prepays to begin occurring. There have been a few that have already occurred in the United States. However, currently the CPEP interlocal agreement and bylaws do not allow electric. It was only created for natural gas. M.U.D. will not participate as an electric prepay buyer. However, our other members and participants are gas and electric, and they have interest in getting discounts on some of their electric purchase agreements that they have in place. So in the next 2 to 3 months, you may see an item on the agenda requesting the board approval for these changes to the Central Plains agreements. With that, I know we've kind of had a long morning, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer them.
Dave, Tim Kavanaugh, can you briefly explain the difference between our arrangement and that of the power pool that OPPD is a member of? How are we covered versus how they were into a situation there where they had to share power?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I know there's a lot of confusion with how the power pool rules and when OPPD joined that. M.U.D. is just a participant and CPEP is a gas supplier. So no different than if we were to buy the gas from another energy marketing company, such as Tenaska here in town, or larger ones such as BP, Shell. They're just a supplier. We're just one of their customers. CPEP can't tell M.U.D. what to do. And the difference, of course, is with the SPP power pool with OPPD. OPPD is bidding their generation assets into that pool, and then that pool is turning around and telling them which ones get dispatched or get to run on any given day, any given hour. And that is their reliability requirements. And that's due to a large outage that occurred, I want to say in 2007 up in the Northwest, or sometime around that time frame. So our agreement with CPEP is completely different in that CPEP has no governance, or we have no requirements at all like that. CPEP is just a gas supplier, and it's a low cost and lower than market supplier for the district.
Thank you. That's very reassuring for our customers.
Any other questions?
Questions? David, I'd just like to say that, as we all know, the cost of gas is the single largest cost component M.U.D. has in providing our natural gas service to our customers. And this arrangement that you guys have done with the CPEP has gone a long ways to keep our cost of gas down. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Steve Oddsmore, you got an update for us on the vaccinations and status of the building?
Could I interject real quickly here, Steve? I wanted to slip this in because it'll only take a second, and it's a nice lead-in since you have safety amongst your other duties. The Nebraska Safety Council has sent me a letter, and this year, based on our overall score of all the things they track, and by the way, their objectives are the same as everyone's, to be safer and to make sure your employees, to the best of your ability, work in a safe and healthy environment and return home safely to their families, and also to protect the safety of the public. So this year, they're celebrating virtually in the month of May, and M.U.D. was honored as Nebraska's safest company with distinction for 2021. Now, while we have a long ways to go and it'll never end, safety is at the top of our minds all the time. And I want to commend Steve, Shane, the entire group that oversees safety, and all of our employees who have risen to the occasion and are cooperative, and our safety councils. Couldn't be prouder. I know this work is never done, but I wanted to let the board know that the Nebraska Safety Council is validating the progress we've made in this area. Thank you, Steve, for letting me interject quickly as a little bit of a surprise.
That's a nice surprise,
Thank you very
Mark.
much. Appreciate it.
Nice surprise. We like hearing things like that. Like you said, safety is the biggest issue that we have as a company, and we'll never relax our efforts, but it's nice to get the recognition that we're moving in the right direction. So, Steve Osmore.
Yes, Steve Osmore, Senior Vice President. The only update I'd really like to provide this month is occupancy rates have not changed yet, but we have greater than 50% of the employee population has received their first vaccine shot, so they're in the queue to complete the process, which far exceeds that of the regional and the national average. As it is right now, approximately 1% of our employee population is off for a COVID-related purpose. We have had 131 positive cases with 125 folks recovered. That's with 9 positive cases in the month of March. I have no further update. Thank you, unless you have questions.
I just have one. Is that Safety Council virtual, or will that be in person on May 31st?
This year it's virtual.
Anyone that would like to attend, we'll set that up for you. I'll also email you the letter that I just showed you, so you have that for your reference.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to ask if the any board members have any other matters of business for discussion.
Just really quick, I want to share with the board that I reached out to Mr. Doyle a couple weeks ago. As we've seen in the news, there's a bill before Congress, or soon to be before Congress, on infrastructure. And one of the items included in the ever-growing list of what's included as infrastructure is for water infrastructure. And it's mostly related to removing lead-based pipes. But I think the timing is good for us right now to formulate a plan. They say it's going to be between $2 to $4 trillion. So while our congressional delegation may not be supportive of the bill, I would like for us to discuss with our congressional delegation how to get a slice of that money for our water infrastructure program. So I know I've spoken with Mr. Doyle about that, and he's had discussions with senior management, so I just wanted to share that with the board. Hopefully, as this process moves along, we'll have a plan in place to have our congressional delegation hopefully get us some federal funds.
That's a great point, Jim.
Thank you.
Whether or not you're for that bill or not, if it's passed, we want to get our fair share of it. Good point.
Thank you for the comments and the discussion, Director Begley. Coincidentally, Congressman Bacon, his office has arranged a one-on-one with him and I in a couple weeks to talk about the district, the gas industry, the water industry, and that's it's an open-ended discussion, but that's on my agenda to discuss firsthand. And after that, I'll follow up with the board and let you know. I don't expect a commitment, but I do expect a really good discussion and really good support from our 2nd District Congress representative on that topic. So thanks for asking.
Thanks, Mark.
It'd be good to know too that applies not only to M.U.D's pipes in the ground, but also into homeowners, because I know there's still a lot of old lead pipes in the old houses, especially closer to downtown. So it'd be good to have that information too that we could share with people.
And another thought, I don't know.
Director Howard, thank you.
Sorry, Mark.
Thank you for that question. Also, lead pipes, as we know, are not the property of utilities, generally speaking, but that's beside the point. They are going to be handled one way or another, and I agree with you. There is discussion of lead infrastructure in that bill, and we'll look at it thoroughly. We just recently had the lead and copper rule before us, which is going to change a lot of things that utilities must do in terms of water and testing for lead and copper. So it's on our radar, and we will give you a report very soon on that topic in general and very specifically as it relates to lead service lines.
Thank you so much. Thank you for staying on top of it.
Another thing I want to mention too is just an extension of what Jim's thought is, it's not ours, but the city with their sewer separation system. We get all this feedback about the sewer bill on our sewer charges on our bill. I would hope, Mark, that maybe make sure you reach out. I assume the city's going to pursue it, but I would like to see the city pursue getting some funds to help that sewer separation, which could bring down our ratepayers' sewer bill and get us off the heat. And Stephanie did a good job putting that reply in the public poll. So we got to keep looking for every opportunity to deflect that. Any other matters of discussion? Go ahead.
We'll have a discussion with the city about that also, so thank you.
Yep. Any other matters for discussion from board members? Are there any members of the public that would like to address the board? And if so, please indicate your intentions to the moderator. Having heard none, I assume we don't. So I've been advised that we will not have a closed session today, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We don't have a closed session? No. Yes, sir. Okay.
Second to adjourn.
Second, discussion? Roll call?
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
Thank you. We are adjourned.